All right, by now many of you have seen the news, unfortunately, that Dr. Peter Attia has been caught up in this scandal with this Jeffrey Epstein stuff. And I want to just share a little perspective from my viewpoint of this. And as a physician, I certainly have provided medical care for abhorrent individuals in the world. There's no doubt about that. And in part of it, when I was doing my surgical training, for instance, I spent 5 years at University of Texas Medical Branch, and we had a contract, or the university had a contract with the Texas Department of Corrections to provide medical care for the prisoners. And, it was kind of the trade-off. As a trainee learning how to do this, you would operate on prisoners to improve your skills. And it's not that we were providing bad care, we were doing the best we could. But we would operate on people that were on, for instance, death row, which always sort of kind of surprised me a little bit because they're death row inmates. But yet, because of the constitutional protections, you're not allowed to have cruel and unusual punishment. So denying those people medical care would be considered that. And so I'm sure, and we didn't know what these people were in for. We knew if they're on death row because their security was different. So we knew they were dealing with awful people, probably rapists and murderers and child molesters. Who knows? God knows what they did. But we provided their medical care, and I remember our residency director at the time telling us, specifically about this issue. And he said, "Look, these people have other people that are there to punish them. It is not your job to punish these people. That's already going on. It's your job to provide care." That was the attitude that we had to do. And I remember. Specifically, there was one particular guy that was a death row inmate, and I was on a vascular surgery rotation, and we were giving him venous access for his dialysis. He was kind of an asshole, to be honest. Most of the prisoners were actually quiet and fairly respectful, believe it or not, but this guy was just really aggressive and not a nice person. I remember thinking to myself, well, maybe they're going to use that venous access that we gave you to lethal injection, because it's in Texas where they still do executions. But, again, I try to reserve, I just try to distance myself from any of that, sort of judgment that you might have for what is required of you as a doctor. The same thing happened when I was deployed as a trauma surgeon to Afghanistan. I mean, we took care of literal enemy combatants, prisoners of war, Taliban members. When they came in wounded, it was our obligation to treat those people. I remember during my residency, there were people that come into our clinic. We're at a teaching hospital, so what happens is, it's a county hospital. You don't necessarily get the Fortune 500 CEOs come to your clinic for care. So a lot of times you get people from very lower socioeconomic status that may have, been involved in, criminal activity, perhaps. You don't know that when you're treating them. And I remember one time we had this guy who was in the clinic for a big leg infection, and then we saw. In the paper, there's a big headlines in the Galveston daily newspaper, or weekly newspaper, what it was, and his picture was on there, and it had crack monster. He was some reverend that was dealing crack or something like that. But I mean, these things occurred throughout my career, and probably in private practice, there were people that I took care of that were probably not nice people. I don't know. That's not something you get into when you render medical care. You say, are you a criminal or do you do this? It's not something you typically discuss with patients. Now, I don't practice longevity medicine, and I think if you set up your practice where you're bilking rich people out of hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is what Peter Attia was doing, basically, or is doing still, charging these people an exorbitant amount of money, and you're doing it for the money. Because I got to tell you, if you're a super rich guy watching my channel, you don't need all that bullshit. You need to exercise, sleep, eat well, get some sunshine, manage your stress, and not pay for all these crazy tests and studies and magic, stupid drugs. I mean, that's not the answer. Okay, I'm not going to sell that. I don't have the ethical fortitude or lack of ethical fortitude to bilk people out of hundreds of thousands of dollars for that type of device. But that's happened throughout time. You got wealthy people, they got all the money in the world, they want to see their life go on and on and on as long as they possibly can, so they're willing to part with a little bit of extra cash, so the doctor that promises them a longer life, no money back guarantees, of course, will make money off that. And honestly, I think that is a shady practice to be in. That's just my opinion in general about this stuff. Now, again, whether you agree with him on certain, and I certainly agree with Peter Attia on a number of things when it comes to health, particularly the exercise aspect. I disagree with him on some things as well. I mean, it's irrelevant to this point, and again, there's thousands of emails or whatever it might have been. So you obviously have a relationship with the person. Whether he knew the extent of his depravity is unknown for clear. It seems to be that he has at least some inkling of an idea. And at that point, is that a voluntary relationship? Do you say, because there have been people that I've met over the years that, when it turns out you find out they're kind of shady, shifty, unethical people, you just kind of step back. Hey man, I don't want to be involved with you anymore. Whether that occurred at some point or not, I don't know. It's unclear. I'm not here to judge or not judge. We'll see what happens. It's unfortunate. And I think that irrespective of whatever may have happened, with those two individuals, I just think the whole sort of longevity medicine, ripping off old people or some rich people is this unethical thing to do in my view. This really is. Now, certainly, I think that what I tell people will help them in some regard or fashion. I'm not charging $75,000 a year for this information. Most of it's free, right? And I'm certainly not getting rich. And I would rather, and this is the honest truth, I would rather help thousands and thousands of people, and maybe recoup a small amount of money from each individual than prey upon the rich and rip them off for money. I mean, that's just the reality of this. But anyway, I'm sure he's going to lose some followers, lose some contacts, probably going to harm his career significantly. That's the way it is. That's the way life is. You move on. Obviously, it's the next scandal or news cycle. It's the next scandal drama. It's whatever happens week to week. I think it's not hard. It's not hard. It doesn't require any special super insight to be healthy and to live a long, healthy life. You just do some basic things. And I talk about those over, and I try to demonstrate those. You guys see me putting up my workout videos. Some people say, "Oh, it's boring. I don't care." Okay, that's fine. Don't watch it if you don't want to. But there are people that are inspired by seeing what I'm able to do at my age and so on and so forth. No, lastly, check out Rivera, guys. We want to help you guys. We don't want to charge you $75,000 a year for stuff that should not be expensive like that. All right, guys. Let me know what you think. I know this is a unfortunately a sad topic. It does affect medicine. It does affect a lot of people in the low carb space because a lot of people sort of have insight, have had input from this particular person. So it's relevant, but at the end of the day, it's not surprising, right? These days, nothing's surprising me. The weird thing is, now with AI, you'll see all these fake letters, and it's sad. And you talk about protecting freedom of speech, and this is another sort of off-topic tangent here, but let's just say someone does some kind of AI stuff, and it involves you, it implicates you, and it's very realistic feeling, and it potentially could ruin you, right? Let's say that happens. And somebody says, what's freedom of speech? We can do that. Do we have to regulate that? That's a real interesting question. Anyway, it's unrelated, but let me know what you guys think in the comments. We'll talk to you later.